crowd.
A large crowd.
Well, you're a best-selling author. What is a best-selling author doing at a technology conference?
A fair question. I've been asked 3 or 4 times already today. I don't say yes to a lot of invitations, but when I got a chance to come and speak here, I leapt at it because I happen to believe that a lot of the people in this room, those creating the technology of tomorrow, will do more to influence the future of human spirituality than will all the religious leaders combined. That's my belief. I'm talking about it later today.
That's a pretty bold statement. That's a lot of responsibility to put on these guys' shoulders.
Yes.
Do you think they're aware of that responsibility, or do you think they're out there trying to make a better photo sharing app?
I've heard a lot of computer scientists feel they are gods anyway, and so I think at least some of them are aware.
So later on, you're going to talk about specifically sort of science versus religion. This is a big theme throughout all of your work.
It is. Yeah.
Is this something that's always been on your mind, or is this? I mean, when did that the notion of those two things being in conflict pop into your head?
I grew up in a very strange schizophrenic household. My mother was a very religious Christian church organist, a professional church musician, and deeply devout. My father was a professor of mathematics and probability. So I was lost from day one.
So you had a conflict from day one.
I've led a very conflicted life.
And have you been going back and forth in that pendulum yourself, or you've always sort of been on the science side?
You know what? It's funny. I grew up on the religious side, and I was very comfortable with religion until I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. I'd heard about Adam and Eve and creationism, and then I simultaneously started hearing about evolution and Darwin. So I went to my priest, and I essentially said, hey, which story is true? And this guy said, nice boys don't ask that question. So I started gravitating towards science at that point, and the further I progressed in science through university, and I know everybody here has had the same experience, the mushier the ground starts to get. The further you get into science, you start having uncertainty principles and margins for error, and the particle physicists say, we don't have no idea why this particle just appeared here, maybe it's God.
And you end up with Einstein saying God plays dice.
Exactly. So you come full circle. And I write a character, Robert Langdon, who essentially says that science and religion are two different languages attempting to tell the same story.
But you also, we were talking earlier, you said science and religion do great damage to each other. Do they have to be oppositional?
I wish I knew the answer. I mean, certainly historically the answer is yes. Science has slowly eroded the foundations of religion. I mean, you look at something like Adam and Eve, and now in the face of genetic research and Darwin and the fossil record, we can say, well, I'll just speak for myself personally. I feel the story of Adam and Eve does not hold up in the face of what we know. Simultaneously, you've got religion doing damage to science, whether it was, Galileo and Copernicus, or even, in my own country of the United States, you've got science teachers who are trying to teach genetics and evolution, who are being picketed by parents who say, you've got to give Adam and Eve and creation equal time. So yeah, they are still in conflict.
So you flew here on an aeroplane, you used the internet, there's someone backstage who's going to talk about building a Hyperloop train. Seems like science is progressing quite well, but religion isn't slowing down either. If they're both sort of moving ahead at the same time, it seems like maybe the conflict isn't going to destroy one or the other.
I think that's an accurate statement. What's fascinating about the conflict to me between science and religion is that they are polar opposites in their approach. Religion, over a couple thousand years, has not changed. If you're talking about our modern monotheistic religions, really have not changed. They still believe the same fundamental tenets, still look to the same texts. That is really what makes religion so attractive to people. It is self-assured, it is consistent. Science, on the other hand, is changing at just mind-numbing speed. And so you have one thing whose strength is its consistency, and another whose strength is every day they figure out something new. And so the battle really is a fascinating one.
Why do you think that religion remains powerful when you, in addition to science bumping against religion, you now have technology and communication that allow your entire world to open up. You can see things you never could have imagined. No matter where you live, you can learn lots of answers to questions with a couple keyboard strokes. Why do you think religion remains strong when there's so much input available to you through the internet, through technology?
I think the reason religion stays strong is that there's something about the human mind that craves order and craves answers. And I remember as a kid, really when I was starting to question religion, that a friend of mine, a very young girl, age 12, died of leukemia. And we were at the service and the priest said, this death was part of God's plan. And I remember feeling that that somehow comforted me, to feel that there was some plan. And really I think it is as simple as that the human mind craves the knowledge that it's not all random, that things happen for a reason, that there is some higher power that we can look to. I have friends who are agnostic or atheist who admit to me, hey look, I don't believe in God, but I still say a little prayer right before we take off on the runway. I don't know why, but I do. And I think a lot of us.
And technology doesn't make that go away. You can't replace that.
No,
you can't sate that. You can't make that fear go away with technology.
I don't care how up to date your iPhone software is when you take off. It's not going to help you.
So you are a very rare person. You are a best-selling author. You did not start out that way. You came to writing sort of late in your career, right, or sort of mid-career.
Yeah, well, I came to writing. I wrote my first book at age 5. I dictated, my mom wrote it. It was called The Giraffe, the Pig, and the Pants on Fire. It was a thriller, sort of Borges, surrealism, surrealism, Borges, little Orwellian in there. But I wrote ever since I was a little kid. And
but you weren't making a living as a writer until
we had a print run of one of that first book, unfortunately. When I started writing, my first novel was Digital Fortress. It was about the National Security Agency, the battle between civilian privacy and national security, which I found fascinating.
But when you wrote that, you had a day job. That was.
I most certainly did. I got up every day around 4 o'clock. I would write for 3 hours. I would get on my bike and ride 8 miles to an elementary school or junior high school where I taught Spanish. Then I would ride to Phillips Exeter Academy to teach all their afternoon English classes, and get up and I would do it again.
So when you were doing that routine, was your thought, I'm going to become a professional best-selling author at some point? Or was this, I've got an itch, I want to scratch it, I'm just going to keep doing it?
I think it's more of the latter. I think for most of us, if your idea is to become a wealthy best-selling author, there are a lot of better ways to make a living, more probable ways to make a living than being an author. There's a lot of hard work involved, and also a lot of luck. I'm always very grateful for the ability to write for a living, the knowledge that when I write something, there will be an audience. It's a double-edged sword. I mean, clearly it's wonderful to have an audience. Simultaneously, at 4 in the morning, as you're typing on your keyboard, and you're not quite sure it's right, you have that pressure to say, you know what, this has got to be right, because I owe that to my fans.
So when you were teaching, you had a day job, you were writing at 4 in the morning. You're still writing at 4 in the morning today?
I do. Yeah, I write every day, but I start around 3:30, 4 o'clock. I write 365 days a year, and I would say about 1/10 of what I write actually makes it into a novel. I'm pretty strict about what actually makes it into a book.
Can we go back to 4 in the morning? Why 4 in the morning? Why is that the sweet spot for you?
4 in the morning is a magical time, at least for me. I have a lot of friends who are writers, and they also write at 4 o'clock. There is no email coming in.
You could just turn the internet off. You can turn the email off whenever you want. Yeah, that's what I understand.
I do actually have an app that turns off my computer screen every 90 minutes. For 5 minutes, whether I like it or not, and I do some.
It goes dark, and you've got to get up and walk around.
I get it, yeah. Do some sit-ups, push-ups, have some, you get sort of lost in what you're doing.
So you had to write at 4 in the morning. This fascinates me. But now you don't. You could do it whenever you want. Why 4 in the morning?
You know what? I think by writing first thing, you send 2 messages to yourself. One is, this is my priority. I want to do this when I am fresh and clear. And another reason to do it is that I feel that there is a very thin veil between the dream state and the writing state. When you're dreaming, your mind is creating something out of nothing, creating whole landscapes and plots. And that's really the mindset that you need to be in when you're facing a blank sheet of paper or a blank computer screen. And so I move very, very quickly from that state into the writing state. without checking email and sort of getting lost in the real world.
And so you can find you can make yourself get up at 4 in the morning no matter where you are. Are you going to get up at 4 in the morning tonight?
I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning. Even with jet lag, I somehow get up early. I actually worked on my talk this morning because I heard somebody was going to show up. I actually didn't think anybody would.
You got to please these folks. So what else has changed? So what else has changed about the way you work? What's the difference between 1995 and now in terms of the way you produce your work? It sounds like you've got the same routine. I mean,
there is no difference between the way I write now and the way I wrote in 1995.
You don't have an army of researchers working for you?
No, I really don't. My wife certainly helps out with a lot of the art history stuff. I'll send her an email. Yes, we live in the same house, but I'll send her an email that says, hey, is there a pre-Raphaelite painting in the...
She's not up at 4 in the morning.
No. She gets that email around 8 o'clock.
She's a rational person.
That's right. So certainly she helps, but for the most part, I really do everything alone. And the reason for that, I find, is that, for example, if I'm going to the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., I'm writing about the Masons and I want to find X, Y, and Z. I'll go to the House of the Temple and I'll learn that X and Y really aren't that interesting. Z's fantastic, but there's this W over here that I didn't even know existed that turns out to be the linchpin to the whole plot.
So you want serendipity?
Serendipity plays an enormous role in the creative process.
And what is having the internet at this MacBook that you're probably using to type this up? How does that change the way you create stuff? Does that make you more or less likely to go out and hang out in
It makes
an
it
archive?
both more and less likely. The internet is incredibly powerful for a writer, especially somebody who writes things based in fact. For example, if I send a character to Budapest and he's going to have a conversation over dinner, I can pick a restaurant, go in, look at their menu, email the chef, find out how it's prepared, how long it takes. I mean, I can really get it right. At the same time, you can kind of get lost in that world and forget that, no, the most important thing is this conversation these two characters are having, not the color of the tablecloths and what the candles smell like. So you have to sort of know when your research has become procrastination.
Do you use the internet to see what people are saying about your work, or do you turn that part of the web off?
Oh, that is a tricky question. I was given some very good advice when the Da Vinci Code took off. I was told, hey, look, don't read any of your press because it's it's a lose-lose. Either you read that people think your work is great and you start to get lazy, or you're going to read that they think you're terrible and you're going to get, you can basically get nervous. What I've come to really accept is that the only way to be creative is to create that book that you yourself would want to read. You write that app that you would want to use, or you make that souffle that you would want to eat. Whatever your creative field is, you really only have your own taste to go by. So I really do put on the blinders, write the book that I would want to read, and then just hope other people share my taste.
And then do you want to interact with your readers afterwards, or you say, look, this is my thing, I've done it, I'm done, and come back in 3 or 5 years when I've got another one to share with you? Or do you want to hear what they have to tell you?
Oh, I always love interacting with my readers. It's important. It's actually very motivating because I work all alone in the dark in my pajamas, and you sort of forget that what you're writing has a life outside of your computer, that it goes out into the world and it affects people, for better or worse. And so when I go out and I meet people, and people either say, hey, I loved your work, or hey, I didn't like it when this happened, or you left me with a question, that is very inspirational to me, and I enjoy it.
But you're not going out on Facebook to read comments?
Well, I do have a Facebook page, and I actually I post pictures from my travels, or I post quotes, things that I'm thinking of, but I'm not on there reading all the responses.
So you're writing every day, you're writing at 4 in the morning, you're working on a new book. When that book comes out next year, in a couple of years when it comes out, how will the way that you sort of push it out to the reading public, how will that be different than 2003 when you had your first hit?
Well, the difference now between 2003 is I actually have an audience. In 2003, I really didn't. And so we were really, really struggling to find people who would want to read about symbols and codes and religion and the Vatican. And I have an absolutely fantastic publisher in Doubleday and around the world, Transworld here in this part of the world. And what they do now, in conjunction, we work together to really make sure that people know my book is out. And that is a much different process than trying to convince people to read it.
Here, I'll speed it up. So you were a hit author a couple of years ago when your last book came out, 2013. Do you imagine that that process is going to change, or is it still pretty much, I'm Dan Brown, I'm a world famous author, here's my new book, you do a book tour, you go on TV, or do you have to sort of work in a different way to find your readers?
Well, I think you have to continually work. I had a very funny experience here yesterday. I walked into Web Summit, I had a little baseball cap on. I spent an hour and a half here with my wife and my assistant, my agent, and my publisher, and not one person stopped me and said, hey. I said, this is incredible, this is a blast. I'm really enjoying this. And of course, my agent and publisher are going, this is terrible. Like, these people have no idea who you are. And
you got to wear a Dan Brown t-shirt.
Exactly. So, yeah. So it would make a lot of people more comfortable if after the talk, at least a few people came up to me and said, I can't wait to read your new book.
So you mentioned that there are a group of people working for you. You do have a publisher. It's 2015. For years, we've been hearing about artists. The technology would allow artists and creative people to go directly to their fans. They don't need the intermediary of a publisher. Why go through a publisher for your next book? Why not just sell it directly?
Well, there are a bunch of reasons for that. I would never consider selling my book directly. And one of the reasons, I mean, really the fundamental reason for me is ethical. I in many ways, owe my career to a wonderful publisher who took a chance on me and said, we believe in your work, and we are really going to get behind you. And that was the Vinci Code, and they put it out there. And I would never, no matter what the marketplace looks like, ever think of severing that relationship.
So let's say you don't have that relationship.
My agent is having a heart attack at the moment, just so you know.
Let's say you're not Dan Brown, the famous author.
Yeah.
What do you think about people who aren't well known, or even people who just don't want to work with a publisher, going directly or going through Amazon?
Sure. I mean, I should add also that I don't know enough about the marketplace for somebody in my position to even know if I would do better financially on my own. My guess is I wouldn't. But for somebody who's just starting out, I think that these new technologies of self-publishing and ebooks are fantastic, because you don't have to wait for a publisher to say, we believe in you. You can say, look, I believe in me. And I've got 500 other people who've read this who believe in me. And I'm not going to wait for you. I'm going to do it. And maybe there'll come a time when I've sold enough that a publisher will step in and say, we want to represent this. We want this on our label. I should add that it's interesting, because publishers have always been the curators of content in the world of literature. And so if you are interested in reading a book, you go to a bookstore or a library or wherever it is you go, and all of the books on the shelf you know are of a certain quality. You may take a book and say, well, I don't like this kind of writing, but you know that there are no typos or very few, that somebody's read this, it makes sense, that it's a book of a certain quality because it made it through all of these steps.
There's a series of filters.
Series of filters, and it finally makes it to the shelf.
And you think that's a good thing?
I think it's a great thing. Because especially now, because everybody with a laptop now has a global distribution deal for whatever it is they want to write. So that's great for all of us who are writers. It's less great for all of us who are consumers, because you go out there and you're lost in this sea of information. You have no idea what's of quality, what isn't. You know that if you turn to the publishers, that at least there, the material will have gone through these filters.
My bet is there's a bunch of people in this audience that say, no, you don't need publishers, and we can crowdsource this, we can create all sorts of recommendation engines. We don't need someone in New York being the arbiter of what's a good book. There's a lot of people out here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that isn't discovered. We could figure out how to do it. That's not a world that seems to interest you.
It isn't, I don't know enough about the market to argue the specifics of it. I just know for me personally, my relationship with my publishers around the world, and I have a lot of them, is sacred, and I will never break that bond.
So that next book comes out when?
I cannot possibly tell you that. We have a pub date, but it's a long time from now. So.
Then I'm going to stop grilling you. One last thing: is science going to defeat religion, or religion going to defeat science?
I don't know if science. Actually, I do know if science is going to defeat religion, and I'll be talking about it actually very, very soon somewhere else in this massive complex.
Go follow Dan. He'll have a hat on. You'll find him. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.